Welcome to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast, providing business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs with the 3 INs: insights, inspirations, and intentional actions. Delivered through monologues and dialogues, we address topics like leadership, productivity, time management, work-life balance, and challenges like stress, conflict, mental health, and much more. Please do not hold back from suggesting specific topics and guests you would like on this podcast. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. And yes, this is one of these weeks where I have a guest on. And it seems to be a little bit of a habit recently that my guests are from the other side of the world. So I feel very privileged to have Eric here, long distance away from me. Let's hand it over to Eric and let's hear a bit about who he is.
Thanks, Michael. I am Eric Robinson. I am 2 months into retirement after spending 24 years in the FBI, where I cover just about every violation the FBI has: gangs, drugs, financial crimes, organized crime, crimes against children, and counterterrorism. So I spent my time doing that, also 15 years as a SWAT operator. And oh yeah, before that, I was a Baptist pastor.
Wow, that's that's an unusual story. I look forward to hear more about that, Eric. Thank you for that introduction. So, um, as you know, and our audience know, this podcast is about mental fitness. So it's about hearing stories and getting a deeper understanding of what does this mental fitness mean and how does it affect our lives and how can we use it in a conscious way. So I will start with a question of like, what does mental fitness mean to you?
For me, over the years, what I've found that mental fitness comes from self-examination. So I can go through motions, I can go through difficulties, but if I haven't taken the time to be mindful, to reflect upon how this has affected me, how did I succeed, how did I fail, and why, I'm lacking that growth. And I found that as you and I are uh, up in years, that brings about bravery when I know that I'm encountering a difficulty and I can reflect on, oh, but I've been through harder things. I've been through very traumatic things, and here I am. I'm resilient. Humans are resilient, and we overestimate many times what the effects of this next bad thing will bring about. We look into the future and we think this is going to be horrible. And yet, from experience, I can say, here's 56 years I've been through things and I have come out. And life changes, but you find a new way to find pleasure. You find a new way for strength and growth.
Mm. I love that, Eric, and that the way you put it, I think, was self-examination, and the other word you put to mindfulness, which is a word I love very much and use very much. That like if we don't reflect and look at what we've done and what we haven't done, and both the good things and the bad things, then we're missing out on growing through to like we can grow more when we allow ourselves to look at things like that. So thank you for that. Now, but what I'm really keen on hearing is a little bit more of your story, and you can start wherever you like, but like
My
starting where you started, like how did you even get into being a pastor in the first place? Maybe start there.
For me, that was pretty natural. I was raised in church. We'd gone to church each week, and it wasn't a forced thing. It was just natural. This is what our family does. It's our identity, and I enjoyed it. And so as a boy, I had a precocious understanding of the Bible and, was always the one that the Sunday school teacher called on for answers. And then as I grew in my faith through college years, I looked at my life ahead and thought, well, I know the Bible. I know the importance of reaching out to people. This seems like the path. And from there, some zigs and zags along the way, but I took then that normal path of schooling and then youth pastor, associate pastor until the church that I was a part of in Western New York said, we'd like to plant a church off of ours. And I raised my hand, so I'd love to be able to do that. Went through the vetting process, and we set up a church that was meant to be one where people who didn't feel comfortable in church might now want to come and hear a message. And so with that core group of believers, I emphasize to them that if we're going to make a mistake, we're going to err on the side of grace. As people come, we want them to feel comfortable in order to hear the message. And I even gave that core group what I called a flinch test. If someone comes into this Baptist church and they're wearing a rock concert t-shirt, and that's not church wear, are you okay? Are you going to be able to look at them and not judge? If you smell alcohol in their breath, are you able to welcome them because this is the best place for them to be? Piercings, tattoos, homosexual, interracial, all these things, can we welcome them without that judgment on face? And we were very successful. We did well, and people came who'd never been to church before. But the problem with that, for me at least, was those who came from outside the church often brought personal issues with them. And I was not capable at that young age, in my late 20s, of separating myself from their problems. And so it wore on me. And I went through a period where every single day, not exaggerating, every day without fail, I had stress related headaches. And so I was doing church the way I wanted to. We were successful. And yet my body said, you can't do this anymore. And I told my wife I need to find a job with less stress. So I joined the FBI.
Well, that makes no sense.
Well, when I talk to people who've been inside the church, like worked at some, they eventually get it. So when I would investigate criminals and they acted like criminals, you say, okay, that's how they are. When you work with Christians and they act in the same nature as the criminals, or they betray you and they treat you poorly, um, now it starts to weigh on you. So between that and the other things, the stress that I experienced in the FBI was different. It was fine.
Hmm.
I would go into a dangerous situation, body would respond to the stress, and then done, moving on to the next task. In the church, I just held on to it, and better men have done a better job of handling than me, and I just couldn't.
Hmm. Well, that makes total sense. Like when you're in that situation, like the FBI, you know you're going into that situation. You're prepared for it, and you're expecting it. And I guess a part of your training to become an agent as well is how to actually deal with that. Where I doubt that maybe your training to become a pastor involved how to deal with all that. I don't know. Maybe tell me.
Well, the difficulty was I was on my own too. So, when I'm on the SWAT team and we're going into a house where someone may oppose us violently with firearms, yeah, that's stressful, that's dangerous. But I'm with 15 other men. We're well equipped, very well trained. They are all at least as good as I am. And so now we have this company together, and there's so much bonding that comes from going through an experience that is, I mean, you can call it life and death, but we've walked through that fire together, and rather than feeling bad, that made me feel closer to men
Hmm.
and bonding with them.
Hmm. Hmm. So tying this into mental fitness, maybe you can sort of speak into that a little bit. That what it sounds from my interpretation of mental fitness, which is the ability to handle challenging situations in a positive way without stress and tension. You didn't manage that with those extreme situations at church. So you didn't have, in my language, the mental fitness at the time to meet that in a positive way. So you made it through stress and wherever that led to. Maybe you can share that with us as well. What what are your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. So working in ministry, it's a wide open question. Here's things that are just going to present themselves to me. In the FBI, largely we were dictating time, place, and circumstance where we would carry out an arrest. And so here's planning, here's executing, and it's done at a very high level. In the church, you know, I wake up one day and let's see what happens and what I have to deal with. And so, one is I was younger and I had less experience, but also, I'm working ad hoc. As someone says, I feel like my kid might be uh, developing a drug addiction. Okay, well, now I have to figure out how to deal with this as
Mm.
opposed to going out and arresting a drug dealer. No problem. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Here's all the people we have, and so one I could set myself up for, and the other one was just, you know, I liken it to running through the woods with a flashlight. Like you don't know when a branch is going to hit you in the face. So um, perhaps if I had stayed in that, overcome those difficulties at 56, I'd be much better equipped, having the experience. But yeah, being young, it was it was something I just couldn't manage.
Mm. So what happened from there on? Because I guess you didn't just quit being a pastor on Monday and started FBI on Tuesday. Like, what was that transition like? Or like,
It was.
oh,
I preached my last sermon on Easter of 2002, and the next Sunday I was in Quantico, Virginia, and then the Sunday after that I was preaching in the chapel in Quantico, Virginia, because they didn't have a chaplain. They needed somebody to fill in, so they kind of eased me into this transition. But the remarkable thing for me is that I could look back. The very day that I got accepted into the FBI, the headache stopped, and I remember actually thinking this, not just feeling it. I don't have to do this anymore.
hmm.
I don't have to fight uphill. And so that transition into something that was more organized and planned just felt much more refreshing for me.
Hmm. Hmm. So I would love to hear maybe again you can pick anywhere in your life, whether as a kid or a teenager or yesterday. Just one more story on the side of like something that didn't turn out well for you, or maybe as you mentioned like stress, or it could be burnout or other things. Because at that moment in time, you did not have the mental fitness to be able to deal with it in that moment. Have you? And it can be a story from your time inside the FBI, or it can be anything.
So, one story I can tell you that can show just how stress showed up and management of it was this occurred a year and a half ago. Our SWAT team was called to arrest a mid 20s subject who was trading in child pornography. And the reason SWAT was called was because he had some violent encounters with family and had some violent encounters with police in the past, had some mental health issues. And the pedophile arrests have kind of raised the awareness of these guys they can strike back because they know their life is over as they see it. And so SWAT was called there as we had everything prepared and were set up to uh, affect the arrest. Myself and two other operators were covering the backside and the side, and just the three of us behind an armored vehicle. And immediately, one of my partners, Steve, called out, "Put down the bat." And the subject had kicked out a first floor window and approached us with a bat from about 30 yards away. And if he had a gun, that's an easy call. But with the bat, we were wanting to give him every opportunity to just give in, just to allow himself to be arrested. But all this came to a place where he refused to do that. And his last words before he was shot was to kill me as he charged with a bat. And I can show you this as I was wearing my Garmin watch. You can tell me the time when we engaged with him, and you can see that spike. And it's remarkable. So the body said, "You've got something you need to accomplish, and I'm going to give you everything you need right now." and then you see that spike up to 178 beats a minute. So might have been a fight, might have been whatever else, and then you see it coming back down
Mm.
because we still had to clear the house. And so th- for me, that was an example of we'd been through the motions so many times on these SWAT operations. Everybody surrenders, everything's fine, we do it well. And here was one that was unexpected. And now the body said, time to go. And now you can see it. And it didn't, like, it would have been perhaps even deadly to me if it stayed up there and plateaued and just
Yeah.
stayed at 180 beats a
Mm.
minute for 5-10 minutes. And it came down and said, now we've got a job to do. But because of our training, because of how everyone had interacted with each other, we got to a place where now we can get the job done. And for me, one other remarkable piece of that event was I said to my partner, Steve, I said, how long do you think that was from first contact to when we finished? And he said, I don't know, maybe about 5 minutes. And I thought, yeah, that seems right, but I know it's less. And it was a minute and a half. Like everything seemed to take so long. And it's just remarkable how mind and body respond to very dangerous situations like that.
Mm. And in part, that's a fight and flight mechanism of the body, which is healthy. And um, in my experience for working with people for 30 years in this field and the studying that I've done in it, it seems that most of us human beings, we actually live in a permanent state of fight and flight, but at a very low level. Let's say, 10, 15%. There's always this, looking out for problem and stressing and worrying. And we are made to be in a situation that you were in. Our nature is made to be in that fight and flight and that high level of stress. It's made to do that, but it's not made to be in it permanently. So as you said, if your heart rate had stayed up, that could have been really, really dangerous because the body's not made for that, but it's fine to go up there.
Yeah.
But if we're living in that place, even at a low 10, 15% level, but we are living in it permanently, then over a period of a few years of that, the body simply cannot handle that. And that's why we see so many very like physical diseases that turn into mental diseases. And again, for me, that's where many of us don't have the mental fitness to deal with that and get rid of that stress. So what I'm most impressed about in what you shared and what you showed us is not how high it went up, but how quickly it went back down.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, "Oh, I need to go back and look at that because I want to see what happened." And I was also amazed, like, wow, I mean, that is just you can see 11:58 a.m. a spike that took 1 minute, and you can see, the heart rate's up a little bit because I'm carrying tools and we have to get ready, and the body says, "Okay, we've got a job. Let me give you a little bump here." But how quickly it came down for me was one of the most fascinating parts that
Mhm.
I think it was because, like, no offense to you, but if had I placed you or a civilian in that situation, there might be a little more of a plateau. But because we had been there and because I knew these men around me were very capable and we had now rendered aid to the subject, okay, now we're back to that first step of here's our next task.
Hmm. So would you say, not revealing any secrets about FBI, that is, how much focus is there in the training of mental fitness? Of like physical training, that's in a way easy. Like you can, go and do some exercises, and here we set up some scenarios, and here we practice this scenario, and now somebody's coming at you with a bat and all of that. But what about the training of like mentally dealing with that and not going into a state of depression afterwards and needing to see a psychiatrist?
Yeah, there's officially very little to none. In this situation, our employee assistance program, I believe, handled it so well, along with our SWAT team leader, rather than, okay, we're going to mandate everybody talk to a chaplain or a therapist. You know, Here's, discuss your feelings and what you went through. Instead, we had the whole team. So now, once again, we're bonded. Here's all of us together. Let's go around the room and just tell about what your role was. And of course, telling about what your role was or what you saw, now people were getting into feelings and what they experienced. And we had guys on the team, and I knew what they would say. They weren't there. And one of my buddies wasn't part of this. And he starts sharing, like, I start getting these reports that you guys were in a shooting. And I felt terrible that I wasn't there to be with you and to support you. And I'm like, yep. Yeah. I mean, that regret is something that he needs to deal with. And so expressed it. And uh, that was a, that was a positive way for us to handle it. And I think that otherwise, much of how agents handle just dealing with that is that when we have downtime, we start sharing stories. And some of them is just to tell funny stories, but also we'll tell stories about like mildly traumatic things or things that are mildly traumatic to me or might be terribly traumatic to someone else. And I feel that that discussion is in many ways a survivor statement.
Hmm.
We went through that, remember? Yeah. And here we are.
Hmm.
We're on the other side. That event could have gone really sideways and it didn't. Laugh, 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 and we're still alive.
Yeah, and not knocking therapy and counseling because it has its place. So in sense, what you're doing there is that, but without the need for the therapist to fix anything in you. Because
Yeah.
often, if we just share things and share stories, and we get what we're experiencing out there, in itself creates a release, but it also creates, in your case, that bonding. Whereas if you're with a therapist, it's just you. But here you got mates around you. And I think
Yeah.
that I had a guest on a few weeks ago who talked about your chosen family. What was most important for him was his chosen family, like his family, real family, but also his chosen family, because they were the ones that were there with him when things turned to custard. And in a sense, you would have had to build a very strong chosen family when you're out in those extremely exposed situations.
Yeah. I have been so after the shooting, part of the process then is to have a shoot review to make sure that everything was followed properly. Is this a good shoot? And I was asked how many like to just establish how many arrests and search warrants, how many operations have you been on? And I thought, oh my goodness, probably 1,000, because over the years, that's so many, and that means these are men and then one woman who was great. Uh, Sitting early morning in an armored vehicle, waiting for things to happen, running through stuff in your head, talking about roles, and all of that just bonds and bonds and bonds. And and so now when we've gone through something, it's like, oh, now we're even closer. And we don't talk about that, but everyone feels it. Everyone feels that brotherhood of we've experienced things together.
Hmm. And it's back to that expression you had early on with what was it, self-examination. So here, in what you were doing in that process is not just self-examination. It's broader than that because there are other people, but it's still that examining what happened. And I think a lot of real profound, deep mental fitness building comes out of that in whatever way what way we're doing. Yes, we can go and do things like you can go and practice your shooting at a shooting range and become a better shooter. But in the moment when you're there needing to shoot, if your mental fitness is not there, you can make some serious mistakes. Um,
I, I agree. And you ask, what has the FBI done to develop mental fitness? And one thing that has become more and more evident, we did this with SWAT, and then it became adopted by the investigative squads, is we have an after action review, which is a sitting down and says, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we change this? And as a SWAT team, we were a very high level group. And yet, on one occasion, we cleared a house so that agents and even some support staff who don't carry guns could come in and now execute the search warrant, knowing that it's safe. And one of our members missed a subject hiding in a closet. And that changed. fully embarrassed. We didn't do our job, and now that had to change. Now we are digging everywhere until we see floors and walls and doing things well. So it's a matter of now we have a programmed reflection. We just did this. Now what do we do based
Mm.
on what results we got?
Yeah. Mm. So I would love to hear just one more story on like particularly on the so positive side of mental fitness where you've been in a challenging situation, whether at church, whether with your family at home or anywhere. That was what was hard or difficult. Like maybe you were building something at home in your shed and you were throwing, a tantrum because it didn't work out or like it doesn't matter what the story, but some story where you ended up succeeding, not because it was easy, but because in that process something switched on for you and you stepped into calling more on the mental fitness you have to achieve that. So for some people, it's like I really wanted to call that person to make that happen or make that date, but I just didn't dare to. But then I took a deep breath and said, I can do this. And then I made the phone call. So, have you got a story or two like of that?
Absolutely. I'm gonna go through my Rolodex of all my stories, but one of the one of the violations that I worked that was meaningful to me was the crimes against children, and that when during the period when I was working that, we were seeking to find. Uh, it, in our case, it happened to be exclusively girls, teenage girls who were uh, being prostituted by pimps. So they were being manipulated. Many of them were selling themselves in the first place, but a manipulative man would come along and get them to now provide him money along the way. And the difficulty, my first introduction to this world was working with my partner, Laura, where I would tag along as she was interviewing some of these girls who were at risk. And they just, all of them opposed her because she was a threat. She's a sweet person, but she was in their lives to ruin what they were trying to do. Obviously misguided, but like every other law enforcement that they'd ever come across, here was someone who was trying to thwart what they were doing in desperation to survive. And we weren't providing with them that alternate means of living. And of course, being young, they had no idea of what else they might do. So many times it was a matter of trying to break through to these young girls and show them that over time it was much like a a stray dog that may have been beaten, that you just want to pet them, you just want to give them food, but they're shaking. They did not trust us, and it took time for us to show our good intentions, bringing in a victim coordinator who is going to work with them, social workers, guardian ad litem who would represent them in court, and others around to convince them that we had good intent. And in some ways, I would try to break in with these girls with humor, and often that showed that okay, the police are okay, they can make jokes too. And I had one occasion where I shocked my partner, Laura. We were taking one 15-year-old girl who I'd finally broken through to her, and she was starting to trust. And we were driving her around where she could show us houses where she had engaged in sex work. And as we drove around, she stopped and said, yeah, I could really use a cigarette. And she's a 15-year-old girl. And I thought, well, I keep cigars in my car. Do you want a cigar? And so me and a 15-year-old girl smoked cigars in a parking lot. And, and my partner, Laura, was aghast, but I'm like, look, man, she smokes cigarettes already and she's having sex with strangers. Like, this is not the worst thing. And that gained her trust.
Mm.
So it was a matter of just having to be consistent, to know we are bringing justice. And when they yell at you and slap you because you're arresting the love of their life, their soul partner, we just had to push through and know we've got some good intentions here.
Mhm. What a great story. And yes, I mean that takes in that moment a certain level of mental fitness to be creative, you know. So people will high level of resilience takes mental fitness. People who are willing to commit to things at a high level takes high mental fitness. High level creativity also takes high level of mental fitness. So you need to tap into that in that process. Let's hear one. Give me one more story from completely different
Well,
area of your life, maybe.
well, I can give you another one. It's not necessarily completely different, but we would often work with, so between cases I worked and ones that I've assisted, the we would do many arrests on pedophiles. So men who are trading in child sexual abuse material or who are looking to physically abuse children. And so many times, whether talking to civilians or even other law enforcement, they would just say, I don't know how you can do that. You know, I just want to put a bullet in their head. They're disgusting. And I I didn't have that attitude. So, coming from a pastoral role, yeah, I was fully disgusted with them. And given the opportunity, yeah, I'd like to bring about some physical justice. But when confronting these men, I didn't have to tell them that they were disgusting. I didn't have to tell them they were awful. They already believed that. They hated themselves already. They felt the shame. And so I could then come to them with a different tack of showing kindness, showing openness, and they responded to that because they expected someone to come in and just treat them poorly, treat them just like everyone else said. I just want to put a bullet in your head. But now being open to them and letting them feel human maybe for a moment, now they are very open to confessing and getting these things off their chest. That worked most times.
Hmm. Amazing. And yes, I know you will have like probably thousands of stories in there. Is there one more quick one that you want to throw in, but maybe from a different area or maybe from your church time or I don't know, something.
Well, so from the church, I'll share from that. Much again, this may not have to do with the mental fitness you think of, but for me it was the building of our church to be a place where people could feel welcomed. For me, that just seemed natural. So I'd come from the Baptist church that I had been an assistant pastor at. They were very strong in this. These are the rules, and not knowing how familiar you are with most Baptist churches, uh, I came into it and here are older people who say you don't play cards and you don't go to movies and you don't drink. And I thought that's odd. And you have to wear your Sunday best because you have to impress God or I don't something. But I also saw that from a perspective. I'd been in church my whole life, but I looked at that to think, why would someone who's not familiar with this life want to add all those strictures as well?
Hmm.
And it just made sense to me to say, trying to apply what the Bible says, my favorite parable of Jesus is he says, the kingdom of God is like a man who finds an inestimable treasure in a field. And so he goes back and sells everything he has so he can buy the field. And we're asking people to sell everything they have, to give up that life for what we're telling them is a great treasure. And if we don't show them first and win an audience, why would they bother changing?
Hmm.
And so, I don't want to give like, here's a sermon and now I'm going to give an altar call so you can change your life based on 25 minutes of me saying nice things. You have to believe that this is worth it.
Hmm.
And this isn't worth it unless you have taken the time to estimate the value that you can see. I like what's going on here. I think this can make my life better. I think this God he's talking about is true and this is all worth it, rather than saying, live this way, be sour, don't ever go to the movies again. And but trust me, once you die, you'll go to a great place. there had to be that winning of an audience. And
Mm,
I did whatever we could to say, look, you take all the time you need, and we're going to love you, and we're going to show you that this is the way. And then when you feel like it, we're here, and we've got something to tell you.
mm. Thank you for that, Eric. And um, all great stories. And I'm sure we could spend a lot more time hearing many more stories. But I do want to move on to as we're coming to the end of this podcast. And you've already mentioned a number of things that has grown your mental fitness. Like which some of them were plain hardship. And others were more consciously done through conversation and that. Can you think of anything else along the way that specifically grew your, say, your confidence, your resilience and that? Did some people attend a course and it changes like I attended a weekend course and it completely transformed my life. That doesn't happen to many people. It happened to me.
Oh,
Um, and other people pick up a book and there's just something in there. I mean, obviously you picked up the Bible, there were things in there for you. But anything else along the way that you did that specifically you can say made you a stronger person?
and it goes to that self-awareness and the mindfulness of reflecting to see what's lacking and what's going on. And there's some actions and activities, practices I had that were rote. And until I would go back and think, why am I doing this? I was not able to emphasize them. So I might have something good that I'm doing, but unless I'm aware of it, I can't recognize, oh, that's good. I need to practice that more or study it better. And one thing that I realized that was a practice of mine was being curious. So
Mm,
as a pastor, you come to me and you say, I've got these problems. And I go, right, here's some Bible verses for you. Are we good? That's not curious. You're not coming back.
mm,
You're, because I didn't listen.
mm,
And that practice that I realized, okay, rather than coming to you saying, I know the answer because the Bible says so, and we've got this figured out. If I'm curious and I'm open and I ask probing questions, now I'm learning so much more about you and maybe even finding out the why behind this.
mm,
Bring that into the FBI. Even when I come to you, you're a criminal and I have all the answers. I've got the Bible here, but it's in evidence form. If I'm open and you start to tell me and I'm curious about what you have to say, whether you're criminal, you're a victim, you're an informant, now you're opening up.
mm,
And I never regretted being curious. I
mm,
never regretted halting my judgment of knowing what I know, setting that aside, and then saying, you tell me about you, and I want to hear about it. And even with the criminals, even with the people that we had in handcuffs, if I set this aside, maybe I set the table to say, this is what I think first, and now I'm going to open it up to you. I can hear what you have to say. And I used that practice on one man who had been threatening political figures in the United States. And I set all that aside. Here's a man who would go on social media and rail incessantly about how he hated all these officials, and that got him nowhere. So all that, typing online, the government doesn't change and he still hates them. Now here we come and I say, in essence, hey, you were railing against the government. Here we are. Tell me all about it. And he opened up and he made it an admission to all these threats because now he had an opportunity to possibly make a change. But rather than saying you're horrible for threatening people, it's like, tell me what you meant about this.
mm,
When you said this guy deserves the rope, what does that mean? Open, tell me all about it.
mm.
And our prosecutor listened to the taped interview and said it seemed like you agreed with him a lot in that, like a little too much. I'm like, well, that's rapport building, and that got him to open up.
I love that. So the word you used there was curious. So I've never heard that before in any of these podcasts using that word as a way in for growing mental fitness. But I can see that absolutely. It's so much easier not to be curious. because then you don't
Oh
have to
yeah.
deal with what other people are saying. Much
Yeah,
easier.
I'm right. I've got it. I've got it figured out.
Yeah, you get up there in the church and you say because you know all the right things to say, and you say it, you can go home and have a good life. Being curious, now you have to start listening, and then maybe you have to change certain approaches and things because of that. And then the same in the FBI. It's much easier to just go and say, "You're the bad guy, here, handcuff, or shoot you if we need to, and lock you away." And I can go back home and and it's much easier. So in that way, by being curious, we are picking a slightly more difficult because now we have to engage. And in that, it takes mental fitness to do that for one, but for two, we also grow our mental fitness in that. And one of my favorite sayings that came to my mind when you said that, which I use a lot, particularly in my coaching, always seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And most of
Yes,
us spend so much time trying to be understood, and sometimes, including me, talking too much. Whereas, like if there is a conflict and we're trying to solve it by overpowering the other person, whether that's the kid or the wife or a criminal, if we just flick that switch for a moment and go, always seek to understand before seeking to be understood. The thing with that, in my experience, is that if we actually listen to other people first, they are more likely to listen to what we have to say.
absolutely. There, the mental fitness, as you describe it, is wrestling internally because you're telling me something that I don't agree with, and whether it's in an encounter with a criminal or just in a discussion, I've had these talks with my wife and others. If someone comes to me critical and I shut them down and I deny that and I say no, here's my argument with why I'm not wrong. This is a person, if this is a close person, if this is a friend, here's someone who just said, I can make your life better if you listen to me. And I said, no, thank you. I think I've got it figured out. If you tell me, hey, this is hard for me to tell, but sometimes you're short with people, and I say, no, I'm not, like, I have just denied an opportunity for me to grow, for me to be incrementally better. And so if I'm open and I'm curious, like, please tell me more about that. What do you see? Oh, look at me. Now I'm a better person. Why
Mm.
would I give up the opportunity to be a better person? That's
Mm,
silly.
absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful. So, I want to finish with like if you have, you already shared plenty of things, but other things that other ideas or little nuggets or maybe a book or any idea for our audience on how they can go and grow their mental fitness. And I also know that since you're retired, I don't know whether you started your book before retirement or you started it after. Maybe you can tell that story. But tell us also a little bit about your book. And I know it's not out yet, from my understanding, but it will be. So we will put the link to it in the description. So over to you.
Yeah, I highly recommend my book. The So it will be out in the fall, and it is called Irreverend: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the FBI, and it tells the
Love that.
story of what would happen if a mad social scientist said, I've got a plan. We're going to take a Baptist pastor who's never handled a gun before, and we're going to stick him in the FBI for 24 years and see what happens. And it's I never lost the fascination that I had when I was first brought in with, oh my goodness, I can be in the FBI. All along the way, yes, there was tedium and things too, but the things I got to do, I would step back and go, this is amazing. And now reflecting back, I still think the same. And so I tell these stories of what it's like from the perspective of a man who was a pastor going through having done this practice and now carrying some of these same ideals through in the FBI with some stories I think are remarkable too.
Mm, mm. So just for those people on my side of the planet, it would be our spring that it comes out. So we'll just
Yeah,
clarify
I
that.
keep right. I keep forgetting. We'll
Right.
just say September.
Yeah,
You guys have September. You guys have September down there, right?
let me have a look. Yeah, yeah. From memory, we do have September,
Okay,
and funnily enough, it tends to come around about once a year. So it should come around this
same.
year as well. So
Absolutely.
put that information. I love the title. That's fantastic, and I also love that you recommend your own book for people with
Well,
mental
I
fitness.
have others I would recommend. I recommend others too, but yeah,
Please do.
the first title we started with was From Preacher to Breacher, because as a SWAT operator, I was the one who broke indoors, and it was natural. But another book, I feel like this is silly because I'm sure it's something that your listeners may have read, but one of the more interesting books I have read is Nudge by Cass Sunstein and uh, his partner from the University of Chicago. And it's about how businesses and companies and governments can um, carry out what they call um, libertarian paternalism. So the idea is it's a nudge. It's this is what we think based on our studies is best for you, and you're completely free to make the choice. So they open with the idea of putting fruits and vegetables up front in a cafeteria. You can reach past them for the pudding, but here it is. We're going to this is the paternalism that we think this is best for you, and then you're at liberty to make whatever you want to. And they refer to it as choice architecture. We're trying to build every business has this, and now they're bringing this into the forefront to say this is how you can build and grow by making these best ideas for people to follow while also allowing them to be completely free.
Hmm. Isn't that what supermarkets do? At the checkout, they have magazines and chocolate bars.
Right.
They're notching you to get that, so it can be used both sides of the coin, kind of.
It can be it can be used for evil as well. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean the idea is like, okay, we'll automatically enroll you in organ donation. Certain countries have that. You can freely opt out, but now you are contributing to society by nature, just
Hmm.
default. But you can always say no, I don't want to do that.
Hmm. Well, thank you for that. We'll put that in the description that book. And any last words or thoughts or books or um, um, what is it called? I'm looking for something here that I can't find in my mind. Anything else?
The one thing that I have found, I'll just add this. The one thing that I have found in conversations is the very effective power of silence. And so when doing an interrogation, many times I would break in, I would ask a question, and then here's a person, and people want to tell the truth. They also want to resolve problems in their mind. And so if I ask a question, the discomfort that comes in the quiet is something that we often want to fill. And the discomfort comes in a few seconds.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so to be effective in what I was doing would be to ask a question and just look, if I feel uncomfortable, you definitely feel uncomfortable, and let that power work rather than break in to say, where were you on Tuesday when your neighbor went missing? And then you're starting to think of how do you answer this? And I say, well, were you at the mall? Were you at work? And now I'm filling things in. I'm giving you answers. Nope. Here's the question. You just answer it. Let's sit with this.
Hmm. And what a beautiful way to finish today, because that's to me a really powerful, powerful, we can call it technique or way of being, which leads into that again, always seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And in order to do that, we need to be able to sit in that silence. And that takes a lot of mental fitness. Because as you said, the tension immediately comes in. I need to fill this space up. So what a beautiful suggestion. Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a pleasure speaking with you here today, and I was really looking forward to this, just hearing that story, and I look forward to that book. Just give us a title one more time.
It is Irreverend, from saving souls to chasing sinners in the FBI.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I really hope that you picked out some nuggets here that you can take with you into your life and play with and just keep growing your mental fitness. Thank you for today. Till next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. If you have stories of how mental fitness has benefited you that you are happy to share, go to my website, mikal.nz, click on podcast and fill in the guest application form. If you want direct support from me utilizing my 40 years of mental fitness learning and practice, email me at coach@mikal.nz or message me on LinkedIn. Any feedback, review, share, follow, like, or any other good stuff is, of course, appreciated. Thank you for listening to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast. I'm your host, Mikal Nielsen.